Okay, so maybe there's 35 of us here, so I know people are still arriving. So let's just take a moment to do that chant like we started yesterday as we settle in. So it's important when you come to a session, and I know some of you are, it's the first thing of the morning that you're doing. So just come into this sensation of the body, feeling yourself sitting on the chair. And just taking a few moments to be here now, coming here with your body's presence. I think Mo was using the term I am right here in the yoga practice. So I am right here. So feel the stability of your body. Allow yourself to find the breath and just be with the breath where it is, your own breathing pattern. And I'll do this short chant to open, and we'll do another chant to close the session as we did yesterday at the end of this session. But for now, this chant. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvashavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So good morning. I was happy to receive the recordings, and I managed to do the yoga practice that you did with Mo as my morning practice, probably when you were sleeping. And so I enjoyed that. Of course, you were in the breakout sessions in the afternoon discussing the Life is Prana and your mother's little helpers, and also sharing a practice together. And what I was doing was, because what's mentioned in that video that you watched on Prana is the EFT tapping. So what I did before I'm sitting here with you is I recorded another little video of the EFT tapping, and Sam will put that up in that same Google Drive document place for you. You'll be able to see that. I can't quite remember how long that is, but the Prana video was probably only 30 minutes or so, and maybe this one's 15 or 20. But that was something that was mentioned that we probably haven't covered. So let me come to what Life is Prana is specifically about. And for me, it's really quite personal, the Life is Prana one. I mean, they're all personal. But when I think of how yoga of recovery was formed, it really was formed around my need to stop smoking cigarettes. And, you know, what happened for me was I got into recovery from addiction. And I think I said to you, I just went to a 12-step program. I didn't go to any rehab. I didn't see any medical professionals at that point. And I really was able to basically stop drinking quite easily. I'd really kind of had enough. And we're going to talk about the Gunas today. And I was just reading something from Swami Shivananda on the Gunas, because I like to get as many perspectives as possible. And I was really interested to see this sentence that he wrote where he says, intense rajas takes a sattvic turn. It's as is the law. We'll be fed up with the activities, and then we'll turn to renounce the activities. It's like we'll wear out our own energy trying to get our satisfaction from the paths that we're in. So I guess I had reached that stage. And so that initial sobriety was not so difficult for me. Although I will tell you that it was really kind of hard to face my life without that habitual behavior in it, because then I had to find new behavior and I had to kind of like reinvent myself. So I was a little stranger to myself in the early days. And I'm going to say again, I call myself a person in a path of long-term progressive recovery, because that initial sobriety was only from alcohol. I happened to have a boyfriend, if you can call it that, that grew weed for a living. And so therefore I had my hands on free cannabis. And so I would partake of that. So I know it's not always the favorite word, as I've mentioned, but I kind of refer to it as my marijuana maintenance program. And I was on that for the first 11 months of my sobriety. And I was having pretty drastic changes in my life. And there was an aspect of spiritual experience emerging in my life. And yet I wasn't able to let go completely at that stage. And that's a little bit towards the Gunas conversation that we're going to have. But, you know, within that stage, I smoked. I didn't smoke a lot of weed. It's kind of interesting that I don't consider myself an addict, truly. I consider myself an alcoholic, and I used drugs, but they were the lesser for me. Like I could have drugs in the house and not have to finish them. Whereas I had some friends, if the drugs were in the house, they had to finish them. I was more that way with alcohol. So those are personal stories, but I had got to the point where I needed to become clean and sober, because really what I needed was a sponsor to help work through the steps. So that's what happened at 11 months into my own marijuana maintenance program. So I took a sponsor and I went into therapy. And then 18 months later on that journey, my therapist wanted me to see a psychiatrist. And I did see the psychiatrist, and I was diagnosed with clinical depression. And so they wanted me to take the pharmaceutical medications. And my response was, I can see why you say that. And what I want to say is, I think there's something else I need to do before I take that route for me personally. And what I needed to do was give up cigarettes. And my therapist said, no, you don't really need to do that. Like, you know, maybe you'll do that once you're on the medication. And I said, well, the truth is, you know, I came all this way from London to Lake Tahoe, and I kind of was looking for a new life. And this is one of the biggest obstacles to my new life. And I'm speaking as a person that has asthma. So I will take a blast on an inhaler and then light up a cigarette. And then when I finish the cigarette, I'll take the inhaler again. So, I mean, that is chronic addiction. I know I'm killing myself. And so I can't excuse that, especially when I've had this kind of miraculous, without much effort from me, ability to stay away from now not just alcohol, but drugs. I need to extend that miracle of change, that shift that can happen. And I need to come to this cigarette problem. And so I embarked on my stop smoking mission. And it was kind of interesting because in that therapy session, he said, I'm not going to be here next week, so it's going to be 2 weeks till I see you. How many cigarettes do you smoke? And I said, about 15 a day. And he said, just cut one out per day, and by the time I see you next time, you'll be a non-smoker. And he said it very flippantly, and I was sitting there thinking, if it was that easy, I would have done it. And he was writing notes in his pad, and he looked up at me and he said, I'm setting you up for failure. And I was so like, wow, who's he talking to? Why is he saying that to me? And I was kind of walking out the door into his corridor, and I was just like, how dare he say I'm gonna fail? And so he kind of threw down the gauntlet, and the kind of nature I have definitely took that and said, I cannot fail. So there I went into this give up one cigarette a day. And that was the time when I swear to God, I came face to face with my own insanity. There was definitely too many hours in the day for the number of cigarettes that I was on. I couldn't do things, you know, I needed to be kept away from company. It's like, I can hardly eat because I want a cigarette after my meal. I can't answer the phone because I need a cigarette. I can't drive my car because I need a cigarette. The only place I can really be happy is sleeping. And so it was a bit of a nightmare. And I was at that time being sponsored by someone who had moved house, and I went to her housewarming party, and I met someone, and she said, you should go to this ashram, because I was saying, I never went to rehab, but I really need a rehab now. I need a rehab to get off these cigarettes. This is like virtually impossible for me. So I booked a week at the ashram, and it was a beginner's week. And it's kind of funny because her other option that she gave me was the Optimum Health Institute, which I think is down your way in San Diego for those guys that are local to Seoul. And when I looked that up, it was offering me wheatgrass enemas. And I thought, hell no, I'm not doing that. And so I'd already been practicing yoga in London. And this was in 2001. And so I thought the idea of an ashram was sort of terrifying, but I knew I needed to go and do something residential. So that's what I did. And I did manage to give up smoking. And I think I have like 19 or 20 years off of cigarettes now, 19. And it was really crucial for me because like the clinical depression was holding on. And if you see now through Life is Prana, one of the main reasons that it was holding on was because I wasn't able to like get to my own vitality because I was seriously corrupting the air in my lungs. And that was already challenged by an underlying disorder of asthma. So what I had come to at this point was that I had said to someone, I can't believe I kind of feel this way in sobriety. I thought I would feel better. But what I have is I have a level of tiredness that sleep doesn't seem to take away. And I have a feeling of hunger within me that food doesn't take away. So no matter how much I slept and no matter how much I ate, I felt tired and hungry most of the time. And then I did, you know, I was doing some research and I was discovering that a lot of alcoholics are diagnosed with hypoglycemia. Now, hypoglycemia will look a lot like anxiety and depression and things as well. And, you know, I had this, you know, asthma problem going on. So there was a lot to that. And it was good for me to stall on the medication route because as soon as medication was mentioned, my mind popped up and said, there you go, there's chemical happiness, grab on. And that's my addict mind. It's still with me today. It still thinks, oh, there's something that will give me a little boost. And so I had to pay attention to that because I also had the idea that what if I take those pills and it doesn't make me happy and if I'm still kind of tired and miserable, what then? So I kind of wanted the pharmaceuticals as a last resort. And I want you to hear me when I say I am not against the pharmaceuticals. You know, some people really do need those. But what I want to say about my personal story is, and this is a phrase I think that comes from Stanislav Grof, who does one of those breathing techniques, holotropic breathing. And he says something like, the level of addiction in our society has reached a spiritual emergency. But from that emergency, there is a spiritual emergence happening. And I felt I was in that birth process of that spiritual emergence. And it was going to take a little bit more effort on my part to like really bring it through. So the Life is Prana one is like really, really relating to this aspect of just the air that we breathe, the life force, and how many things definitely impact that. So I also just posted, and I'm going to find this link for you. I just posted an article about the issues about cigarette smoking. And, you know, a lot of people don't even consider that too much of addiction. But I just posted that link on the side chat for you if you want to look over at that, you know, article that I posted. It's from Bill White, who's an amazing researcher in this field, a good friend of John Kelly from the Recovery Research Institute. And we all present at a conference down in Florida in November, usually, called Multiple Pathways of Recovery. And I'm there representing yoga and Ayurveda, although nobody really knows what Ayurveda is, but we've had some fun down there, and he does excellent research and blog posts. So I've posted one of those. So I wanted to say that in relation to Life is Prana, because that is pretty important. And then if I can, I just want to, can I share a screen, Mo, just for a quick review on those slides?
Let me give you the power.
I have the power. Share my slides.
You have the power. There you go.
Ah. I have it now. Let me
You
see.
should, yeah.
Okay, share screen. There. Mhm. It's interesting it doesn't always find it, so let me come off of there again. It's the way. Kind of, there, it should find it now. So if I share screen here, I'm not going to show you the whole slideshow again, but I just wanted to focus in on this one slide because I think it kind of succinctly says what I'm hoping to say. And can you see this coping mechanism slide?
Yes.
Okay. So the coping mechanisms that we're talking about for the prana aspect is, and I've made up these prana disturbed states. So let me tell you what that is. I sat through many addiction recovery conferences, like the recovery industry, and they'll have the PhDs and the MDs and stuff. And you know what I'll say to you about these conferences is that generally there's a rehab or a big drug testing company that's going to pay for the speakers to get up there. And so they're like sponsored speakers, and they're going to represent like the Meadows or Betty Ford. So it's a little bit like an advertorial, really. And a lot of them talk about the evidence-based treatment, and so therefore they're talking about this chronic relapse in brain disease. And I went to one, I think it was advertised as a holistic recovery. They brought me in to teach yoga, and I listened to the speakers, and everybody talked about the brain, and they talked about that part that I put in, the reward deficiency syndrome, where, you know, we're told that I, as an addict, am pleasure deficient. And, you know, I remember sitting there thinking, I don't know if that sits with me too well. You know, because I just have an idea of myself as something much more than the brain. And if anything, all through my, like, growing up in my household and having to deal with alcoholism as my younger life through my mother and her drinking, the one thing that I could rely on was my brain. I felt, you know, that I could go to school and I could do my schoolwork and I could jump through the hoops of academia and, you know, pass exams and get a degree and stuff. Like, that didn't feel like the problem area to me. What really was the problem area was the emotions. And I wouldn't have been able to say that at the time, but if you looked at my behavior, you'd pretty much guess it. So the whole brain concept doesn't sit that well with me. Of course, I understand it, but I kind of crave the more holistic version of that story. And the idea of, for us, is that, you know, the brain is the brain, but then there's this larger aspect to us. So brain is physical body, anamaya kosha. But then we have these other 4 koshas. And as we're moving just to the next one, we're in the prana maya kosha. And the prana is the energy. And the seat of prana is the heart, not the brain. So then that brings me closer to understanding the next level, because it links to the manomaya kosha, and it's going to start to link to the emotions and the feelings and things. So as they were banging on about the brain and the reward deficiency syndrome, I was thinking, yeah, but for holistic medicine, it's more than the chemicals. So the idea of prana is this electrical force in the body. And so it has a much more vast impact on the entire system. And I think that's what we are really good at understanding, whether it's yoga or Ayurveda or even Chinese medicine, that let the ancient healing systems understand this. So I just sat with that concept of prana, and then I thought into those states rather than talk about prana, which again, people are going to be like, what's she talking about? I want to make it really relatable and accessible to people. So then I can use life as prana, and then I'll go to people and I'll say, okay, so what would this look like? Like if your prana is like unsettled or erratic, you're going to feel wired. If it's low, you're going to feel tired. If there's blocks in the flow of the prana, you're going to experience pain, both physical pain and psychological pain. And then just generally stress. So we know the idea of stress is going to like overactivate some of the system and downregulate some of the system. Like it activates what we call the fight, flight, and we in Ayurveda, yoga of recovery, I also say tend and befriend response. And so that brings on that state of emergency. And in a state of emergency, your brain is not adapted to make the long-term better decisions. And so we do seek that instant gratification. So those coping mechanisms, summarized as stimulation, sedation, self-medication, and instant gratification. And then when you look at what's happening in our world, you've got this world out there that is kind of overdrive, hypersensory stimulation, hyper speed. And so it's constantly offering you something to stay on that amped up level of energy, that instant fix. But the big point of Life is Prana is this next point. The short-term pain relief created when we resort to those things is outweighed by the long-term progression of disturbed prana. And over time, that's going to lead to depression, mental stagnation, denial, and addiction. It's going to lead to that because our whole medicine system is based on the law of karma. From cause, there will be effect. From action, there will be consequence. And so it could be that you're on the fast train because you resort to some stronger drug like heroin or cocaine, or it could be that you're on the slower drug train because your drug is cannabis. It could be that, again, you're on the socially acceptable train of externalizing your solution, workaholism, you know, so you might never see like disastrous results from that, or you might come up with some autoimmune disease or something in your 40s or 50s. Like there are consequences to the choices that we make. And then what happens with that increasingly disturbed prana is that that situation is then causing, it's like a catch-22, a negative feedback loop, where it's causing that wrong desire and insatiable craving. So when your prana isn't well situated in your body, which is like stabilized and centralized, you have that kind of hollowed out feeling. You have that depleted feeling where you're kind of grasping for anything that's going to make you stand steady and be strong for all the demands that your life is asking from you. So wrong desire and insatiable craving, and then we become misguided, misdirected, wrongly motivated. We're running after things in the external world. So one of the other things we're going to talk about today is this Rajas effect. And the effect of Rajas is in the short term, pleasure and stimulation, but in the long term, pain, distress, conflict, and suffering. So that thing that we choose to give us that instant fix kind of thing is in the long term causing that disturbance. So that's all I really wanted to cover as a review of what you were talking about yesterday. And then if I can stop here roughly 24 minutes into our session and ask Mo, do you have any specific questions from anyone, or did you have any direction on how we wanted to hear feedback? Because you were there more in the afternoon. You know, specifically, what were you sharing about in that session? You had 5 minutes to share to each other. What do you resort to when you have that wired feeling? Like, and maybe you can put it in the chat. What was your list?
Can you stop sharing your screen so we can see you?
Oh, you don't see me when I'm sharing?
No.
Okay.
Well, just a tiny little box.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I really couldn't tell. I only got to share with 2 other people because everyone was in Zoom rooms. So it might be fun and illuminating to just post into the chat. If everyone would post a word or 2 about your own mother's little helpers to meet the wired state, we could all kind of reflect together if you feel good about that, Durga.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. It's nice when they all pop up.
All right, everyone pop up.
So one of the things I'm going to say, because this can be a mistake in this, the way we're phrasing this, but when we're asking you this, we're tending not to go into the idea of I do pranayama and I do this type of asana, because we're in the addictive behavior here. We're in like what I call acting out behavior. We're in that short-term relief. We kind of know it's not that great for us, but we're going to do it anyway. Mo, I heard you mention coffee yesterday morning, and then I heard you mention tequila. So it's those moments we're talking about. And that doesn't mean everybody's an addict. But again, when does that become addiction? It probably has a lot to do with the idea of you're still resorting to this and your prana's dropping kind of dangerously low, that you're feeling tired and wired and stressed and in pain more and more regularly. And your little helpers aren't really helping anymore. They may be making it worse. So there's our words. Oh, you got some list. What a range. Food, TV, wine or exercise, food, social media is a big one now. Movement, CBD gummies. Well, they put it in that form. That's sugar and CBD, I guess. TV, weeds, food, White Claw. I gotta say, I don't know what that is. TV, CBD, being in nature. That's a nice one. So we'll say that's a sattvic response there. Marijuana, snacking, exercise, wine, running, biking, cleaning projects, shopping, the big one, accomplishment, yeah, making the list and checking things off. The zero inbox is part of that issue these days. Work, food, screen time, walk. Generally, I would think walk would be in one of our more sattvic, one of the remedies. Alcohol and TV, food, social media, naps, wine, beer, mindlessly scrolling, there's another one, cleaning the house, walking dogs, big glass of wine, food, marijuana, caffeine, acting out, shopping, exercise, tequila, there's someone that can join you, Mo, always on my phone, wine again, calling a friend, usually we'd say we hope that would be a sattvic response. It depends if the friend's gonna just, encourage you into your delusion states, or if they're gonna kind of call you on some of your stuff. Caffeine, social media, the phone, the TV, the chocolate, the sugar, the food, writing. I think that again, we put that as, more of a solution than something that's going to cause too much more problem. Benadryl for sleep. Yeah, there's a lot of people that have like a lot of use of over-the-counter stuff. And, I think probably over time you do develop tolerance, and that, again, we talked about it yesterday, the side effects of these things. Sugar-free dummies.
I think she meant gummies.
Oh, gummies, okay. Okay, and there Sophia's saying more of the yoga stuff. So, and maybe you do not connect with the idea of acting out. One of the things that I find interesting is that a lot of people have things that they're going to say they use this when they're tired, wired, when I would think if I used that, it would make me more wired, and so what's going to come up as we investigate into this is it's amazing how much identification is there, that you identify yourself as someone that can do this, you can do this drug. Even the drug habit across cultures and societies changes every decade or so because of what's legal and what's hip and what's in type of thing. So there's that kind of sense of ego identity with my acting out behavior. And there's also a strong sense of intention, that what you intend this substance to do, it will tend to have that effect. So somebody could be using wine or alcohol, for instance, because they feel wired and it sedates them. And that same person could use alcohol because they feel tired and it stimulates them. And it's the same alcohol, it's the same person, but they're getting different effect, and it has a lot to do with what they've set their mind towards. So it kind of shows us the power that we are as like the internal pharmacy and the power of that mind's intention. Okay, so that's a great, oh, White Claw is alcoholic seltzer. See, I'm too far gone from that market now. I don't know the new ones. Lisa Myers has put creamer. Like, what are you drink creamer? Is that? I used to be a wee bit hooked on those little chemical pots of vanilla creamer, which I can only imagine. I don't know what's in them, but it's probably
nothing good.
Yeah, nothing good. Yeah, I wouldn't drink coffee without it. So it was really that sugar chemical concoction I was also looking for. So some different ones during the pandemic. And again, some of you giving us like the more healthy options. I'm glad to see those, and we're going to have another kind of session on where you bring some of those together. So Lisa's saying it is for the coffee. Yeah, I recognize that. I used to do that, but now I don't really drink coffee, so that got me off the creamer. I have to say also that when I was coming off of cigarettes, one of the things that I had to do was I came off of the Marlboro cigarettes that I smoked and went on to American Spirit. So I needed to get off the sugar and the chemicals that were in the Marlboro and come down from there onto just nicotine in a cigarette. And that's a pretty big experience, difference of experience between those two. And then when I was giving up smoking, I was coming off pure nicotine at that point. And so I was staging that as a process. And that's going to come up a little bit as we talk about the Gunas and the differences of like what's sattvic at different stages as we progress from tamas to rajas to sattva. That's going to be our teaching session after our introductions today. So I'm trying to read all of those. Delilah's got blaming her husband, starting an argument. Yeah, I could pick that one up, although I think I got my husband pretty well trained now. He's cleaning even when I'm not there. So especially in the pandemic, yeah. It's a whole range of things. And that's why I call them Mama's Little Helpers. And what I really want to say here is we have a lot of wired people in our society. You know, a lot of us talk about, oh, it's another day in the rat race, and like we're struggling to keep up with ourselves and things. And that class that you did, Mo, was really nice in the explanation of that, because we can't stop that as soon as they walk in the door. They can't just turn on a dime and become something else. So it was nice how you were leading us into those things. And again, Mo's been working with me and Yoga of Recovery for a number of years. And then, as she said, you all have different training in yoga styles and you all have your own experience. And so you'll bring that to any practice that you want to offer. So that's good. Anything else, Mo? Any questions?
Not yet this morning, but if anyone has any questions, you can just write, I have a question, and we'll bring you up, or you can write your question. Yes, question from Irina. Good morning or afternoon,
Hi.
depending on where you are. Good morning.
Morning. So my question is about wired and stress. Somehow they seemed a little bit similar for me. Maybe that's how I feel it on myself. It's hard for me to differentiate between stressed and wired in terms of emotional feeling in the body. Can we explain a little bit more how different they are?
Mm-hmm. So I just had a conversation with Mo about this. I'm going to pass it to her because she said it really nicely.
Yeah, Durga and I were sort of going back and forth on this, or at least I was. It was very clear to Durga. But to me, wired is a feeling of both body and mind feel very rajasic, very amped up. The idea that I just can't sit still. I have to go for a run, or I have to clean the house, or I want to calm my body down, which for me is what that glass of tequila does. It just, the whole thing. Stressed is not so much a body sensation, but a mind sensation. So it's mostly here, whereas wired is the whole thing. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. So if it's something external, like work related, that would be just stress.
I think it depends on your experience of it. So for you, work related might just be in your mind, that your body doesn't feel like it needs to expel energy. You're all, kind of bouncing around and moving around. That's how I feel wired. Stressed is very much in my head, and it can be about work.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a bit more of a clear difference. Thank you.
And what I'll add to that is, and we're not going to go into that here, so I don't want to overemphasize it, but in my training and the constitutional type, that that wired feeling is much more available to the vata first and pitta, and kind of less so at that physical manifestation level for kapha. But all of them can be stressed, but they'll all show their stress differently, whereas tired, of course, is available to all of them, but even under tired, a vata type might still come forward with more of a wired, like frenetic movement type of thing as a response, whereas the kapha wouldn't. The kapha would kind of, more slump back, and they have stability in their nature, and that stability is becoming slower and more harder to motivate type of thing. So it's a little bit towards that. But in a lot of the yoga recovery of the 6 tenets, I'm trying not to get into the dosha conversation. I do have another course called Yoga Recovery Between the Mat and the Meeting. And that's when we bring in the whole Ayurveda concept. And it's similar to this. It's like a 50-hour course. And we're going to go through the component parts of Ayurveda and build up pictures of that puzzle so that we can have a multi-layered understanding of the embodied self and why we have differences. Like, I'm going to say one thing that's important for me, and it's kind of encapsulated in a moment that I had in my addictive life, that I was the ripe old age of 14, I'm going to say, and I was with my friend at her apartment drinking like really strong vodka before we were going out to the bar, to the nightclub, to do more drinking and dancing and hoo-has. So she came into the room with a pill and she said to me, "Here, you want this?" And I was like, "What's that?" First pill I've ever been offered. And she said, "It's a Valium." And I was like, "What does that do?" And she said, "Well, it calms you down, makes you feel all relaxed." And my response to that was, "No, I don't want that." Like, hand up, like, don't bring that anywhere near me, because that is not my mission. Like, my mission is to get up there where other people live that I don't feel I live. So, like, think about that. Like, I'm feeling tired is what I said. So I was tired before I started using these things. And then when I damaged the prana in my system the way I did, on top of asthma and all of that and everything that I did, then when I got sober, I had a really kind of depleted, metabolically disrepaired, low prana system. So in my early days of recovery, I was having to deal with a physical reality. And I would say my number one complaint was I was tired. So therefore, I did a lot of coffee and sugar, but then I would go to bed at night and I couldn't sleep. And so therefore, I'd sleep maybe about 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I wouldn't want to get up till about 9 or 10 in the morning. So I was always trying to catch up with myself. So a big part of the Life is Prana is that very few people seem to pay attention that these states were the pathway into the addictive behavior for many of us. That these were the existing states to which we were responding with these externalized coping mechanisms. And when you take those coping mechanisms away, that's going to be right in your face again. You will now have to face how you felt that you were trying to kind of run away from. You were trying to instantly fix or self-medicate. And that's where I think we strongly come in with these Life is Prana practices, because we are not going to say it's all in your head, you know, don't think like that. We're going to say, hey, that's probably that is your reality, and it doesn't always have to be. And you can change what you resort to. Like what, if we say, what were you seeking? Seeking vitality. And so that idea is like, yeah, of course we want you to have vitality. It's not like you're going to have a life of sobriety and not feel that vitality, that enthusiasm, that verve and joie de vivre. We want you to have that. But, you know, we definitely don't want you in a deprivation state. So we want you to have access to that. And kind of like the Life is Longing is we want you to know that this is your inherent nature. That, you know, the life force that raises the sun is what is living you, and you have access to that. And I always try and emphasize this idea of empowerment. So when it comes to prana, and like I'll make reference to the 12-step program. So they have this terminology that says higher power. And so then I'll say to people, and this came up yesterday with Stacey, I think right away, about the idea of the God and the higher power thing. So then I'm going to say to people, you know, that HP, call it healing power, call it healthy prana, and then know that there's these yoga practices, ancient people have been doing these for thousands of years. And again, why are you not hearing about this from the great scientific medical model, the media that reports on it? Because there's no drug company can really get behind prana, because there's no way they can copyright this. They cannot make a penny on prana, really. But you can see that they'll try, because if you search vitality in Google, just see what comes up. You know, it's all consumer products, and there's a lot of people standing with their hands up like this. I'm feeling high on vitality, and it's because I'm taking this multivitamin type of thing. I think vitamins are most equated with vitality. But for us, it's non-material at the most crucial level, which is the breathing. And there's some real stuff around that. Like I saw Satbir Khalsa present like deeply in his amazing research on yoga. And I think this one was definitely for post-traumatic stress disorder. And what was being talked about was the pre-trauma stuff and chronic diseases, I think. And one of the things that the research showed was every single person that was suffering, one of the things that they could say that all of them had was, and I don't like this terminology, but they were bad breathers. But that often comes to me because, hands up, I'm a bad breather. Like I've had asthma since I was a child. So definitely, you know, I think I might be here to learn to breathe. And so let's hope I get that, you know, I graduate that class before I take my last breath. Maybe my last breath will be my best breath, who knows. But like when I needed to come off of cigarettes, that's what I knew I needed to, I really needed to go back to this very, very basic thing of breathing, kind of being okay with breathing. And, you know, somewhere maybe in my past life, I experienced something that stopped my breath in a way, you know, because I was asthmatic from 7 years old. And if you look at the history of asthma, it has a lot to do, like you can read Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No, and it has a lot to do with like genetic inherited stress and some like, you know, kind of ACE issues, I'll call it, you know, childhood experiences that's like more than the immune system or respiratory system can cope with when the body says no. Gabor Mate. So I think that's all I want to say about that. Did I answer?
Yes, it was a perfect answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I just want to, for a moment, Christina just brought up, doesn't it have the same effect on the nervous system, wired and stressed, that it raises your blood pressure and it, you know, changes the blood flow in your body? And I would say yes. And to me, when I was planning the classes, what I was thinking about was, and we're going to learn about the Gunas, so it might not be completely relatable to everybody yet, but later on you might be able to touch back to this, that wired is a sense of Rajasic body and mind.
Mm-hmm.
And stress might be Rajasic mind and then, you know, tamasic body. Often when I feel stressed, and this is again is this personal thing for me, when I'm wired, I'm actually, you know, like Durga said, I'm in a great mood. Like, don't give me Valium. Like, I feel, you know, I'm manic. I want to get everything done. Like, woo, you know, until I want to go to sleep, and then that's not happening. So then that's when I watch the numbing television or have a drink. But stress is not a pleasant experience for me. It's a different feeling. Yes, my mind is still manic, but you know, I want something. I don't want to be stressed. I want to get something like the, you know, food or something to instantly stop that feeling of stress. So it's just nothing in yoga is going to be, oh, it fits right in this little box and I know exactly what to give someone, right? We actually have to inquire and sit with someone and really, you know, be with their energy and our energy. And these are just suggestions of trying to put something in a category that might not always fit so perfectly in the category. And I think you're all keying into that, which is why you're asking this question. Does that make sense, Durga?
Yes, Mo, you've said it beautifully there, because, you know, even when I think back to the way I brought those words forth from my experience with life, is just kind of what you're saying, the manic depressive. So the manic is, I didn't say manic because it seems too strong, but that manic phase is the wired phase, and the depressed stage is the tired stage, sort of thing. And so in the drug world, it's uppers and downers, you know, so there's the throw me up there and then bring me back down again. But that's the actual energy that's happening, and you'll see that as we talk about the gunas. And then also, you know, what I'm saying personally is that I would say I very rarely feel the wiredness. I don't have the Energizer bunny type of energy about me, but I do feel stress. Yeah, like I'll often feel stressed, but it doesn't come with that. My body doesn't start bouncing up and down, and I'm not overly keen on any feeling that gives me that tremendous like inside my body. Even although I would use drugs that would help with that, it was not my favorite feeling. I mean, to the point these days that I can recognize that when I'm on coffee, that's all it's done is rattle my nervous system. It hasn't speeded up the real process that I need working, which is speed and clarity of thought and comprehension. Like coffee doesn't do that. So there, you know, you begin to know the difference when you're kind of balanced in prana and sattva. And then you have that experiment of, you know, I was saying to my doctor friend, one of the ways that I can really feel the effects that things that overstimulate me is if you try and do a mudra, I really feel it in my hands. Like you did a lot of mudras in the class, Mo, and if I was on like sugar and caffeine for that, then I'd feel that kind of, ooh, like there's friction kind of in my hands. Whereas without those mama's little helpers, then I can come to like steady state, especially in the hands. And you're going to learn that the hands are the motor organ of the air element, which governs movement, which is vata, which relates to prana. And so all this beautiful connectedness, hopefully you'll see that flow and you'll just begin to understand that. And what I mean here is that our diagnosis is at this kind of interconnected, holistic, intuitive level, because you'll be able to read the person's body. You'll be able to hear the language that they're using. Now, people use with me wired, like they'll use that word. And so I'm alert because, you know, I've said each person has the narrative, and to heal, we have to listen to the story and help reweave the narrative. So again, there's a part of me that's not going to fight the way the person feels. So there's this aspect of those states where mostly say that if I'm feeling tired, I do want to stimulate, but then you'll have people that say, actually, I'm wired, I don't want to sedate, I want to get more wired. And they're probably going to push into the manic thing, especially if that's left to develop over time, you know? So this is just, it's just the general movements of this more subtle thing that we are talking about, which is prana. And I'll say this just because it's something that as soon as I think about this, this is what helps me understand what we are doing. Yoga talks about the three bodies. So there's the physical body, and you guys are learning the kosha, so that's Annamaya kosha. And that is the 5 elements in Ayurveda. And yes, that works on a largely chemical basis. Yeah, the physical body. Now that's what they're banging on about all the time in the allopathic medical model. So, you know, excuse me, I'm a bit cheeky, but it's like banging on about the brain again. And if you want to get a seat at the table, if you want to talk at the conference, just put neuro in front of anything that you say, and you'll be given the prime spot to speak. So they don't even call it yoga, like they call it neurogenic exercise. It's like, okay, like we're on the brain bandwagon right now, but that will change because that's what happens. It's like flavor of the month type of thing. It used to be a whole host of berries, as far as I could see, that we would, you know, we'd swear by the blueberry or the goji berry, and everybody would be rushing out to buy the new berry of the month or whatever, because it was like this cure-all. It's this panacea. It's like we know everything because we know this one thing, and that's not yoga's message. So there's that. Then come to the astral body or the subtle body of yoga, and you've moved into the more subtle. So it's not this gross effect, but it is energy. For the koshas, you're now in Pranamaya kosha, Manamaya kosha, and Vijnana Maya kosha. So those 3 koshas making up that subtle body. Now that's huge, that subtle body, but it's not tangible. So it's the part of the medicine that we have that the allopathic medicine does not have. And it's hard for us to prove that we have it, which is kind of funny because, you know, it's the life force itself and it relates to the mind. And hear this, the mind is not the brain. The mind is not this physical organ that's sitting inside the skull. And very few people in like Buddhism and all the general spiritual and wisdom traditions consider that the mind sits between the ears as such, that the mind is non-local. So my body can be sitting here, my mind's somewhere else. The brain's still here, you know, because it's more stable. And then the other aspect of us, the third body, is the causal body. Causal body. And that's like the seed body. And then what we're looking at is that operates, I should say this first, the subtle body works not on a chemical level, but on an electrical level. So there's an electrical force there. And like, I find this interesting because the people that get close to that is the heart math people, heart math. And they have an app, and currently I use it every day. You plug it into your phone and you put it on your ear, and it's measuring your heart rate variability to see your level of coherence. And if you want to become more coherent, you focus into your heart center and you feel joy, and that makes you more coherent. It's not here, it's not the brain thing. And things like that, you know, over the years, I've seen Richie Davidson talk about his work. He's a neuroscientist. He does all the research in one of the universities in America. And he presents to the Dalai Lama in the Mind Life Society. And he was talking about going to the monks, and they were doing compassion meditation, and they were putting the nodes on the monk's head to measure the brain as they were doing this meditation. And as he was doing it, he was hearing like snickering and giggling out in the audience of monks, and he was looking at them, and they were just kind of like, what's he doing? And he was trying to say that they just thought it was really funny that the monks were doing compassion meditation, and he was putting the nodes here as if compassion was the brain, you know, because it's not the brain. Compassion is a different center. And again, think of our chakra system and all that, you know, if you can centralize the prana, which is the whole purpose of the Raja Yoga path, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana. So dharana, you're beginning to centralize that prana into the sushumna. And then you're going to start to activate this subtle energy, this electrical force that's working. The body can be still, but there's lots of things happening at this subtle level. So the electrical force. And that third body, the causal body, works on a magnetic level. And I just love that, because what that says is that you, as a living, breathing being, spirit embodied in this, you still have that spiritual ability to magnetize towards you that which will give you the opportunity to learn the lessons and move on. And that's your own karma classroom. You've created it through previous action and consequence of action. And so what we call the prarabdha, that part of the karma that is fructifying, you are here like a little magnet drawing that towards you. And so that's a big part of me being able to live in this world and accept that what's happening to me is actually happening for me. And that's a big shift in perception. So 3 bodies, physical, subtle, causal, working on chemical, electrical, and a magnetic level. So we are definitely multi-layered beings. And the whole process of yoga is to move us towards understanding and relating to the subtle aspect of the nature, not just the gross. Okay. So any questions on that? I know we're coming up to the hour.
We have a whole bunch of questions. Donna, you're next. Can you start your video?
Hi, yeah, my question might be a little bit off topic, and so if you don't want to go into it now, no problem. But I was wondering, is it possible to be addicted to emotions, to particular emotions? I'm thinking about like anger. I know that that's sort of a go-to thing for me sometimes when I'm feeling tired. If I want to bring more energy to myself, I'll just think about something that makes me angry. So I'm wondering if you want to touch on that or not.
Yeah, I would say the answer to that is yes. I don't think we would tend to use that terminology, you know, addicted to. And I think, Donna, as we talk about the gunas this morning and this afternoon, as you go through that pre-recorded, that you'll see that anger is considered in the rajas, so it's an activated state. And so when we're not able to like just generally bring up like the prana activated state, then according to our type, we might resort to a kind of reaction. And the reaction is like disturbing and activating. So it makes us feel that like we can get on with things, but it's an inherently unsteady energy. It's an energy that's like dissipating the prana rather than building the prana. And so like rajas really, of all of this discussion, rajas is the big word in addiction, because it's that, it's the like illusion and it's the wrong imagination, the wrong perception of things. And it definitely gives that short-term little jolt to the system, whether it's delivered as a substance like alcohol or coffee or sugar, or whether it's just we're generating it from our own emotional reactions. And Rajas is reaction, you know, so we can definitely boost our system from that. So I would say, yeah, Donna.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I have a request. Someone asked me to just reinforce, and probably I didn't say this enough, that this training, as even more so than some other trainings, can bring up really difficult emotions. And that's why we really want you to have a training buddy, to make sure that you are supported and you have someone that, you know, you can call. And of course you can reach out to myself or Shannon, or even email Durga. And sometimes it's the lectures, and sometimes even the iRest can bring up difficult thoughts, emotions, states. So if that comes up, you know, feel free to just stop and find some other practice that supports you. Call one of us, call a friend, reach out to your training buddy. This training can bring up really, really difficult things from our past and current lives. Do you want to say anything about that, Durga?
Yes, Mo. I think because this is, you know, just generally describing a lot of like the base, this is life science that we're talking about at this level of yoga and Ayurveda, and like we're all here, and like I'll use this word again, this idea of suffering. So the pain that we're going through because of the karmas that we're living through. So yes, these things will come up. And you know, my baseline is to touch into, like, progressively into this. The 6 tenets are there to help us respond to that. And so the inner resource is a good thing to practice every day, maybe several times a day. And that's the quick 5-6 minute meditation that you can ground into that felt sense of safety and ease within yourself. That reminder of you being the spirit, which is what the life is longing is about. So going back to that words that you had, like, I long for this, so let me practice that. And so, you know, taking rest or taking moments of peace or practicing loving feelings towards yourself and others, like, that's part of it. And then everything that we're talking here in this life is prana, like knowing that the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we eat are all supporting this life force being that we are. And so we're surrounded by the life force. So medicine is there continuously for us. And then we're going to go into gunas and life is relationship. And there's going to be other little component parts to add to that. So yeah, easy does it.
Thank you. Okay, Maya has a question.
Yeah, hi. I was just kind of wondering, like, about, so what did I ask? Let me scroll up. I was just kind of more so just like musing on the idea of kind of like the law of opposites then. So out of balance, you know, sattvic energy, that's super wired where like you can't shift out of it. But I know, like, I don't know, in my experience, sometimes that's like needed or helpful to like get chores done or like do the necessary things like I don't really want to, or more of that like tamasic kind of like tired energy is sometimes helpful for like if I'm, you know, sick and getting over an illness or something. So I'm wondering if you could kind of speak to just like the, I don't know, kind of like the dualism of that, where, you know, like when it's out of balance, it's kind of like you can't shift out of it. And then there's, yeah, I don't know. So I feel like that some of these tired, wired stressed. Sometimes there's healthy versions of each one. Yeah, so I'm wondering if you could kind of go into that.
So I know where you're coming from, and I think again it's just a part of the difference of the way we language this in our healing system.
Sure.
So I'm going to talk about the gunas soon, and I might repeat some of this, but just generally, and I was reading on this morning because I'm reading about karma right now. And so the gunas are an evolutionary pathway. The gunas are causal. So again, at that causal level, at the blueprint of your life, the seeds are there, and you're going to live through those seeds. And what we're talking about with the gunas is you're developing and evolving at this subtle level of mind and emotions to purify and experience your true essential nature and not be so limited by the ever-changing body-mind transient event that is holding the spirit. So the gunas show the path of evolution, the doshas do not. So the rule of the healing path is that we want to move from tamas to rajas to sattva. So when it comes to this deeper story of healing that's coming from yoga, especially across the three bodies and the five koshas, but we're really moving into an ever subtle awareness away from the gross effect of just matter, that it has to be here, has to be in this shape and form for me to understand it. So you're going into subtle understanding of that. So the only healing in yoga is sattva. Sattva is the one that heals, and it heals at the causal level. So the number one rule of both yoga and Ayurveda for healing is bring it to sattva, and sattva will balance the dosha energy because it's causal. It's the cause of the mind system, and it's cause of the last effect, which is the gross body system. So then when we talk about balance in things, we talk about gunas as qualities of the pairs of opposites. So right. If you're light and restless, then we would apply the like heaviness or something like in a herb or a food or even a blanket on you, so that we would balance those opposites. So the healing path is to move from, and here's some of the words for it, tamas, which is latent potential, rajas, which is active development, and sattva, which is mastery of the mind-body system. And then even beyond that, you have to move beyond sattva to have the transcendent state. Yeah. So it's a little bit of the aspect of the language that we're using. And yeah, there's a lot. But I am going to cover that, Maya, this afternoon for at least an hour. So I think hopefully you'll get more of an answer in that session. And if you don't, I'd like you to come back and clarify it with me again. Okay?
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Rebecca's saying, can I write that down, the three gunas? What did I say?
I will. I'll do it.
It might be on my slides too. Latent potential,
I'm sure it is.
Development and mastery.
Yes. And Gopala just wrote it to me. Gopala, can you write that to everybody, please? We have a few more questions. Do you want to take them? No?
We want to have at least maybe 5 minutes. I'll try and be very brief in my answers.
Okay, Justine.
Hey, good morning.
Hi, Justine.
I guess good evening to you. So my question was, I guess this might not apply when we're speaking specific to like drug addiction, obviously, but I was curious if your say like your substance of choice is something that you previously had a like dependent relationship with, example like sugar or cannabis, or I think like cacao is a really good example for me. If you were able to like shift your relationship with it to an intentional imbibing, say for example, in a state of like feeling really wired or manic, where I might otherwise like consume sort of unconsciously, if that shifts into like a sit down in ceremony with myself, be present, feel into my body, and yeah, imbibe in a way that is very present. I guess I don't know necessarily what the question is, but yeah, can you speak to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can. So I think I know what you're saying. So like rather than it being this sort of unconscious automatic response, that you're able now to like turn to it more consciously and actually be in presence with the process of you imbibing whatever it is and using it more ceremoniously or ritually. Yeah. So, you know, that is like I'm just going to say we could call that a harm reduction technique, that you're no longer just like on automatic enthralldom to the substance, that you now have a detached way of dealing with it. So there's plenty of people that would say, yeah, that's fine. I would be aware of that, because one of the things about addiction is, and it's kind of hard to say this, but I'll give you it the way I would think of it, the way I'm trained, is that the cause of disease, according to Ayurveda, is also a 3-part process. So I told you that forgetting the true nature of spirit is the initial shift into disease, just like the klesha disease. Yeah. But then the next 3-part is misuse of your senses, crimes against wisdom, so misuse of your intellect, and then the effects of time and environment. So the more you repeat something, the more problematic or disease causing it becomes. And the one that centers on this is misuse of the intellect. So we would say the mind is still mistaken that the solution lies outside of itself. So you haven't come into an independent solution that is within you. You're still externalizing that solution. So there's still a part of rajas to that. And then there's the effect of karma. So every substance leaves its impression. Every time you do something, it creates that deeper samskara that you're more likely to go to that the next time. So repeated habits are creating these go-to behaviors within us. And so for those of us who have had, and what you mentioned it as, like previous dependence, that's kind of tough, because that's a well-worn pathway. You know, what fires together wires together. So a lot of us have to kind of lift up out of that old highway and get on a new highway to establish new patterns and not revisit the other ones, because they're too easy to revisit and they're too easy to kind of reclaim unstable system. And you'll hear me use those words with rajas, inherently unstable. And so that the mind as an addictive agent needs to be dealt with as much as it can towards its power principle rather than its externalized distraction principle. And some of this I want to say is like, I am still talking in some of this from the idea of where yoga wants to take us. It doesn't want to take us just alleviating the symptom. It wants to take us to the home of the power that is living us. You know, it wants us to take us to that state of self-realization so that we move beyond suffering. So it's an interesting conversation when we're really speaking about yoga therapy. Like, do we still have that same idea? And I kind of stick with it. It's like, yeah, why not? Like, if you really could have something that is like, you were mentioning the koshas in the chat. So the Annamaya kosha is that physical level, but if you could get more subtle and more in tune, that you'd be living more at the joy level, the Anandamaya kosha. And then whatever it is that you get at the physical level would be pale in comparison to what you would have as an inner daily experience of living in a purified, yogified organism that's, you know, properly directed towards your real essential nature, Satchit Ananda, and your vibrant with prana nature, if that makes sense. So yes, I'd say the answer to you is it could be harm reduction that you're talking about, and there's nothing wrong with that, but yoga does ask us to wake up to the idea that nothing lies outside of ourselves. Like, we have the power within us. And I find that hopeful, and I find it empowering. And I think that's what we need as a medicine right now, especially in the like the social justice arena that we're in. Is like, we need to stake our claim in our own power that's freely available to us should we want to use these tools. So I hope that helps, Justine.
Yeah, it did. Thank you. I was worried that's what you were going to say.
Well, again, like I don't want to like say, you know, like put you in a deprivation state. So I'll also point out that when we go into life is sweet, I'm going to give you sense-based remedies, like that the way that we can use our senses to bring in a sense of balance and harmony and well-being rather than disease. And then when we go into life as love, we're actually going to ritualize that so that we're not in the needy, wanting, selfish, grasping state, but we're using the senses in rituals. So we spiritualize the use of our senses. And then when we do that, as we enter into a ritual space, we understand that there's a certain sacred purpose to what we're doing, that it's not just more distraction or more avoidance of the pain. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.